Your calling doesn't require the crowd's confirmation. That's a hard truth most people don't want to hear, especially in a world that thrives on likes, comments, reposts, and validation. We've been conditioned to believe that if no one claps for it, it must not be real. If no one else believes in it, it must not be valuable. But your calling was never meant to be a democracy. It's a divine decision, and when heaven sends out that assignment, it doesn't wait for public approval. It simply lands in the heart of the one it chose, quietly, powerfully, purposefully. The crowd will almost always be late to the vision. That's because vision isn't given in bulk. It's distributed individually, one person, one heart, one mission at a time. And sometimes, when that calling is first revealed to you, it won't make sense to anyone else, not even the people closest to you. That's when doubt creeps in. That's when you start second, guessing the very thing you once felt so sure about. You'll start replaying conversations in your head. The silence will speak louder than the support you expected. But here's the thing. Their confusion doesn't cancel your calling. Their lack of excitement doesn't diminish your anointing. Their hesitation doesn't mean you didn't hear right. That's why it takes boldness. That's why it takes backbone. Because there will be moments when you'll have to walk forward with nothing but a word. No proof, no plan. Just a conviction that won't let you sleep at night. A fire in your chest that refuses to go out, and it won't make sense. You won't feel qualified, you'll feel alone, but if you were waiting for everyone to sign off before you stepped up, you're going to be waiting forever. People will applaud results, but they rarely celebrate obedience. They'll cheer once the vision is visible, once the product is polished, once the fruit is hanging from the tree. But they're nowhere to be found while you're still planting seeds in faith, while you're watering the ground with tears, while you're believing against all odds that this thing inside you has meaning, has weight, has destiny. Sometimes God will purposely hide your calling from the crowd to test if you're committed without the compliments. Can you still show up when no one sees you? Can you still write when nobody's reading? Can you still preach when the room is empty? Can you still build when the blueprints don't make sense even to you? That's the test. That's where real purpose is forged, in the silence, in the shadows, in the seasons where applause is absent and approval is invisible. Because if you need the crowd to move, the enemy will always have a weapon. All it takes is a little bit of rejection. A few people walking away, a couple of closed doors, and suddenly you're doubting the very thing you were created to do. That's why your identity has to be rooted deeper than praise. If their celebration is what fuels you, their criticism will destroy you. The calling is between you and the one who gave it. It's not up for debate. It's not up for discussion. It's not waiting on consensus. When you really step into your calling, you have to be willing to look foolish. Noah did. He built a boat when it had never rained. Abraham left everything he knew to chase a promise he couldn't even see. Moses stuttered his way into leadership. David was anointed in private, while his own father didn't even think he deserved to be considered. That's the pattern. Over and over, God calls people before they are confirmed by the world, before they're popular, before they're polished, before they even feel ready, and that call always demands courage, not comfort. Not convenience, but courage. And when that courage starts to grow inside you, when it starts taking up space where fear used to live, you realize something powerful. You don't need their nod to obey your nudge. You don't need their confirmation to keep building. You don't need their understanding to keep going. You don't need their faith to believe what God told you, because it wasn't a conference call. It was personal. It was intimate. It was specific. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is move in silence, walk in obedience, and let the fruit speak for itself. The same people who doubted you will circle back. The same ones who walked away will ask how you did it. But by then, you'll be too focused on what's next to waste time explaining what they couldn't understand in the first place. The real ones will recognize the calling, not because you screamed it loud, but because you lived it out. Consistently, faithfully, boldly, and that speaks louder than the crowd ever could. Opposition is often the proof you're on track. That's not something we like to admit because we're wired to believe that resistance means something's wrong. We think if it's hard, it must not be meant to be. If people push back, it must not be our lane. But that's the lie. That's the trap. See, purpose has a way of attracting pressure. The moment you decide to walk in what you were called to do, friction shows up like clockwork. And that friction isn't always a sign to turn back. Sometimes it's the very evidence that you're moving in the right direction. You don't face resistance when you're sitting still. You don't face resistance when you're playing it safe. You face it when you start stepping into places the enemy doesn't want you to go. The opposition isn't just random, it's targeted. It's strategic. It's time to shake you, distract you, delay you, or even destroy you before you realize how powerful your obedience really is. And if you're not careful, you'll interpret that pressure as a stop sign instead of a signal to keep pushing. What if the doors that slammed weren't rejection, they were redirection? What if the people who left your life didn't walk away by accident, but because their absence is what makes space for your growth? What if the weight you feel isn't punishment but preparation? Sometimes the attack is just confirmation that the anointing is real. That the calling is heavy, that the mission is dangerous to the enemy's plan. Think about it. Nobody breaks into an empty house. Thieves come where there's value. And if your life has been under constant attack, maybe it's not because you're cursed, but because you carry something so valuable. Hell's been nervous since you were born. Your purpose is a threat, and the moment you start walking in alignment with it, things will shift. People will change. Warfare will increase. That's not something to fear. It's something to recognize. You don't panic in a storm when you understand that storms don't last. You anchor down. You keep walking. You push through because you know this isn't happening to you. It's happening for you. Every great story includes a fight. Every champion had to battle through the noise, the doubt, the fear. And every time you face opposition, it gives you an opportunity to deepen your faith, sharpen your focus, and solidify your commitment. You'll never know how strong you are until your strength is tested. You'll never know how real your purpose is until you feel pressure that dares you to give up on it. You're going to feel tired. You're going to be misunderstood. You're going to have days when you want to throw in the towel and go back to comfortable. But purpose never lives in comfort. Destiny doesn't unfold where everything is easy. It grows in tension. It develops in resistance. It's birthed in the fight. Sometimes the opposition comes in the form of silence. You put your heart into something and hear nothing back, no feedback, no recognition, just quiet. But don't mistake silence for absence. Just because no one sees you yet doesn't mean you're not being positioned. Just because no one claps doesn't mean heaven isn't watching. The crowd doesn't get to confirm the mission. God already did that when He put it in you, and sometimes the opposition shows up as failure. You tried, you gave it your all, and it still didn't work. At least not the way you hoped, but failure doesn't cancel calling. In fact, it usually clarifies it. The setback is not the end, it's a setup for refinement. You're not being destroyed, you're being reshaped. You're not being punished, you're being prepared, and if you quit now, you'll never see what all this opposition was protecting you for. See, some of the pressure you're facing is really training. Every no is building endurance. Every delay is building patience. Every rejection is strengthening your resolve. You're learning how to stand when everything around you says fall. You're learning how to walk by faith, not by sight. And that's exactly the kind of vessel God can use, one that doesn't flinch when things get hard, one that doesn't retreat just because the road gets rough. So don't despise the struggle, don't curse the storm, don't let the resistance make you retreat. You're not off track. You're probably closer than you've ever been. And the enemy knows it. That's why the pressure's increasing. That's why the voices are louder. That's why the road feels heavier. Because purpose is on the line, and when that happens, you don't fold. You don't freeze. You fight. Not just for you, but for everyone connected to the calling on your life. Because make no mistake, your purpose isn't just about you. It's about the people who need you to survive this season, and they're watching to see if you'll keep going. The resistance is real, yes, but so is the reason you started. So keep pressing, keep showing up, keep moving forward. Because opposition isn't the enemy of your purpose. It's the proof that it's alive. Purpose is not always comfortable, but it is always worth it. That's something people don't tell you when you start walking in it. They talk about the promise, the breakthrough, the blessings, but they skip over the struggle, the nights of questioning, the weight of responsibility that purpose brings. They don't tell you that stepping into purpose sometimes means stepping away from everything familiar, everything easy, everything that once made you feel safe. Purpose will stretch you, it will strip you, it will demand things from you that comfort never could. You're going to have moments when you look around and ask, is this really what I signed up for? Because the path is narrow and it's not always lined with applause. Sometimes it's lined with silence, sometimes it's lined with pain. You'll feel lonely, you'll feel inadequate. You'll question whether you heard right, whether you moved too fast, whether you missed something along the way. But deep down you'll know you're right where you're supposed to be, because comfort doesn't produce calling. And purpose rarely feels easy while it's unfolding. The thing about purpose is that it never shows up looking like you expect. It shows up in the hard moments, in the heartbreaks, in the sacrifices. It shows up when you've got to keep going even when there's no sign of progress. And yet you keep going anyway, not because it's easy, but because something inside you won't let you quit. That's how you know it's purpose. It pulls you, it won't let you sit still. It keeps calling your name even when you try to ignore it. There's going to be seasons when you're grinding in silence, doing the work nobody sees, and in those seasons, it's going to hurt. You'll want to go back to comfortable. You'll want to shrink. You'll want to take the easy route. But easy doesn't leave legacy. Comfort doesn't make impact, and you weren't built for small things. You were built for something bigger, something eternal. And that kind of purpose doesn't come cheap. You're going to have to pay for it, not with money, but with discipline. With consistency, with obedience, with trust, sometimes with tears, sometimes with isolation, sometimes with delayed gratification. You're going to have to say no to things that look good, so you can say yes to what's actually meant for you. That's not punishment, that's preparation. That's what purpose demands, not just talent, but character. Not just passion, but persistence, because purpose isn't just about what you can do. It's about who you're becoming while you do it. The truth is, there's a cost to comfort. It seems safe in the moment, but it robs you of growth. It keeps you stuck. It numbs the call. Purpose, on the other hand, wakes you up. It disrupts your peace so you can find real fulfillment. It interrupts your plans with something far more powerful, God's plans, and those plans won't always make sense to you. You'll be asked to move before you feel ready, to let go before you feel healed, to speak when your voice is shaking, to rise when all you want to do is hide. But that's the beauty of purpose. It doesn't wait for perfection. It requires faith, and in that faith, you'll start to find a version of yourself you never knew existed. One that's stronger, one that's wiser, one that's more resilient. You'll look back and realize that the discomfort was the very thing that developed you, that built your endurance, that deepened your faith, that shaped your voice, and you'll see that it was never about being comfortable. It was about being complete. There's someone out there who needs the version of you that comes out of this discomfort. They need the wisdom you're gaining in the fire. They need the light you're carrying through the storm, and if you quit now, if you choose comfortable over calling, you'll miss not just your breakthrough, but theirs too. Because purpose isn't selfish, it's generational, it's legacy, building, it's life faltering, and that kind of weight doesn't come without resistance. So even when it hurts, even when it's unclear, even when it costs more than you thought it would, don't turn back. Don't settle, don't shrink, keep pressing into the process, because the purpose on your life is worth every tear, every lonely night, every step into the unknown. You may not see it now, you may not feel it now, but one day you'll look around and realize the climb was worth it. The pressure was worth it, the stretch was worth it, because purpose was never supposed to be easy, it was just supposed to be real. And real things always come with a price, but when you pay it, when you surrender to it, when you embrace it, you'll know it was worth everything it took to get there. God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called. That truth changes everything. It flips every lie you've ever believed about not being good enough, not being ready, not being worthy. Because the call on your life was never about your resume. It was never about your GPA, your bank account, your family name, or your comfort level. God doesn't scan through a list of perfect candidates when He decides to use someone. He looks for the available. The willing, the ones who say yes even while trembling. He chooses people the world would overlook. He picks the ones who don't fit the mold because purpose was never meant to be predictable. You might look at yourself and see brokenness, insecurity, or flaws. But God sees potential. God sees a vessel He can shape, a heart He can use, a life He can breathe purpose into. He doesn't wait for you to get it all together before He calls you. He calls you and then gets you together in the process. That means you don't have to wait to feel ready to move. You don't have to have the plan mapped out before you take the first step. You don't need all the answers. You just need the faith to obey. It's human nature to think, why me? Surely there's someone more prepared, someone more talented, someone more impressive. But God isn't looking for impressive. He's looking for surrendered. Throughout history, He's used people who didn't look the part. Moses had a speech problem. David was overlooked by his own father. Esther was an orphan. Gideon called himself the weakest of his tribe. Mary was a teenage girl. Peter had a temper. Paul had a past, but none of that stopped God. In fact, it qualified them even more, because in their weakness, His strength was made undeniable. What's powerful is that God doesn't hide the imperfections of the people He calls. He uses them because of their imperfections. It's through the cracks that His light shines brightest. When people look at you and know you couldn't have done it on your own, that's when God gets the glory. That's when they start asking, how did you get here? And you get to say, I didn't. He brought me. That kind of testimony doesn't come from a life of perfection. It comes from a life of obedience, and obedience rarely makes sense in the beginning. God will often call you to something bigger than you because He wants you to rely on Him. He'll put you in rooms where you feel underqualified, not to embarrass you, but to elevate His grace in you. He'll stretch you, not to punish you, but to prepare you. And if you trust the process, if you don't run from the discomfort, you'll find out just how equipped you really are. The truth is, if you were already fully qualified for what God has called you to do, you wouldn't need Him. And that's never the point. He wants partnership. He wants your heart, not just your skill set. So don't sit on your calling waiting to feel more capable. Don't delay your obedience until you feel like the perfect time has come. There is no perfect time. There is only God's time. And when he calls you, he already sees what you can't. He sees the version of you that's on the other side of the process. The version that's bold, the version that's healed, the version that's walking fully in purpose. But you only meet that version when you stop waiting to be qualified and start walking by faith. That's when everything changes, because what you think disqualifies you is often the very thing God will use to reach people others can't. Your story has power, your scars speak, your journey matters, so don't hide behind the belief that you're not enough. If God called you, He's already factored in your shortcomings, and He still said yes, you're not the exception. You're the example, not of perfection, but of grace, of transformation, of what happens when someone with nothing to offer except a surrendered heart says, "Here I am, Lord, use me." That's all He needs, a yes, a mustard seed of faith, a willingness to go even when you're scared, because that's where the qualifying happens. In motion, in obedience, in the daily steps where He strengthens what you thought was weak, sharpens what you thought was dull, and develops what you didn't even know was inside you. So if you've been disqualifying yourself in your own mind, stop. If you've been sitting on the sidelines thinking you're not ready, stop. You're not here by accident. You're not reading this by chance. That dream, that burden, that fire in your chest, it's not random. It's a call, a whisper from heaven that says, I chose you, not because of who you are, but because of who I am in you. And that's enough. That's always been enough. So here's the truth, plain and powerful. You were called. Not because you were perfect, not because you had it all together, but because there is something in you that heaven trusted enough to assign purpose to. You don't need the crowd's confirmation to keep walking. You don't need ease to prove you're on the right track. You don't need comfort to validate your calling, and you certainly don't need to be qualified by the world when God Himself has already said, go. Yes, the road will get heavy. Yes, the silence will be deafening at times. Yes, the resistance will come hard, but none of that means you're off course. It means you're in alignment with something real, something eternal, something worth fighting for, so don't quit. Not when you're this close, not when someone is waiting on the other side of your faithfulness, not when heaven is still backing every step. If you are called, and you are, then walk like it, rise like it, speak like it, move like it, because purpose never needed your perfection, it only ever needed your obedience.